Thank you. Upscaling is probably the word, but just to the previous speakers and everyone, welcome to the world of CAA and the Air Services Licensing Council. I know all about it, but it does seem to me that some of the regulations that apply to you are a bit over-restricted. I hope it changes in your favour, and I really pity you, Matt, struggling with these issues. Okay, just position myself. Is this still okay? Yeah. All right. Just a brief history. I'm a fisheries scientist, but retired. And after that, I got involved in aquaculture, citrus farming in the Bladen River. Always had an interest in aviation, a bit of an environmental activist, and I was always an environmental and a conservation lobbyist. But through our presence in the Lowveld, being into flying, it quite naturally evolved that we became involved in supplying air services to the conservation areas in our area. Our core business is still hot air ballooning, by the way, but that really helped us get a head start in the, especially the regulations, the CAA, Air Service Licensing Council. Really, once you have an air operator certificate, not an ROC, but when you sit in the aircraft, it becomes an AOC. It really helps you to. After that, it's really just modifications and adaptations to your basic licensing to start doing new things. So our servo business really came to be as a result of requests for air support from conservation managers, even in Kruger Park, because we were involved in environmental activities and because we flew. So initially it was formal, it is now formalized, but it was demand driven. We didn't discover a technology and decide to apply it to conservation. Really, the conservationists asked us to develop products for them. So this coincided with another aircraft that was donated for anti-poaching support, and it was placed in our care. So without really planning to, we found ourselves involved in two parallel endeavors. Rhino protection, which really just landed on our laps, and then the remote sensing really developed largely as a result of our activity in rhino protection, and the rhino protection side of our business is completely voluntary. There is donor funding involved. Although there are volunteer pilots, there are professional pilots and commercial pilots. The skills development really helped a lot, and also the requirement for high resolution imagery in rhino protection really contributed a lot to our commercial side, which is the remote sensing. And just some pictures on, there's the fishery scientist with his new friends, and our clients really are what I call men with guns and dogs, and men with guns and dogs and helicopters, and in close association with them also the close support we gave to other air services, I think developed the skills of our pilots and really helped a lot towards our development on the commercial side. There's an image of a successful hunt, combination, men on the ground, helicopter, the fixed-wing aircraft, and the fellow there is mine. Oh, sorry, I thought there was a pointer on the screen. Is there a... There we go. The fellow there with the green shorts, he's a poacher that just got apprehended on a 40-degree Christmas day. But our imagery really attracted a lot of interest, because just simply aiming a telephoto lens out the window of the aircraft and taking pictures is what they asked us to do. Started bringing in pictures that were of particular interest. You can see the notches in the rhino's ear. They are notch codes to be able to identify rhinos. So more and more there were requests for services that we didn't really plan for, and it started spilling over from rhino to other animals. And it's been mentioned before that rhino really it's a flagship species, and a lot of other species benefit from rhino protection. Operating in this kind of environment, it only became natural that services were being requested by the managers. This is our playground. It's the Lowveld, the Kruger Park, the APNR, the Association of Private Nature Reserves, and other reserves. Really all of those that were protecting rhino. And then a brief list of the additional services that were requested, and just some samples. This is an author mosaic of a crime scene. There's a carcass being dissected. The cartridges are marked with markers, And this is a scaled image, so it can be used as, or like, if needs be, it can be used as evidence in court. As I mentioned, just pointing a lens out the window and taking pictures became very useful, especially if you can simply splice pictures together and have a large number of pictures in a panorama style simply spliced together. You can then really have a lot of information for the managers or the ecologists in a single image. So that's built up of a whole number of images, and this is typically the product we deliver. Now, it differs a bit from the images that you showed us from game count. We do game counts, but we don't do it with vertical imagery. I'll show you shortly a map of how it works, but this is what the let's need the play. Is it playing? There we go. Okay. So this is a screen capture of what the ecologist or the reserve manager who's looking at or counting the buffalo herds, what his screen would look like. You see, we overlaid those yellow lines to facilitate the counting. So that would be an image used for total count of a herd. And this is how it works, really. Next one, please. There we go. Okay, so the aircraft flies a typical search pattern. It doesn't take images until the spotters spot the game. And then, really, as you mentioned, you can't fly a grid pattern and take it because you'll have ghosts. You'll have three-headed giraffes, as you mentioned. We went through that trial and error as well, and you have a buffalo's head over here and his backside is over there and stuff like that. So, and transparent buffalo and so on. So what we realized is if you do splice images together, that has to be very rapidly. So if you can photograph the whole herd in less than 2 or 3 seconds, you'll get a perfect image. So what we do is we don't saturate the ground with imagery. The spotters in the plane find the herd or even the individuals, and the plane then orbits, takes the images or batches of images, and each batch would only take a few seconds to take those images. And this is the kind of results we would get to provide. This is the Sabi Sands providing them, in this case, rhino distribution and density. And it's affordable enough that they can do it several times in a season. You know, all these reserves have an annual game count by helicopter. We would latch on or tie up with that in where the helicopter, instead of then actually counting the large herds, would only record their positions, and when there are 5 or 6 such positions, we would launch, go and photograph those herds, and it simplifies. It's a cheaper. Well, it saves the reserve quite a bit of revenue by using a combination of helicopter and manned fixed wing. The advantage we have, I said earlier, a helicopter has an advantage. It gets the animals on the move, and hence you can see them, and hence you can detect them. I guess with so many security flights and fixed wing aircraft in Kruger and the surrounding reserves, the game have become completely habituated to aircraft being overhead on a daily basis, that they now completely ignore fixed wing aircraft. And you can get imagery like this without disturbing the animals, not just buffalo, but throughout all the species. They just completely ignore an aircraft overhead. So beyond sticking the lens out the window and taking images, we found an increasing demand for products that would require photogrammetry, as has been covered earlier. So I think the key to our rapid advance is that instead of going to classic air survey with large airplane, very expensive equipment, we found ourselves looking at equipment and techniques and software that was developed for the drone industry and upscaling that to a manned aircraft. And that's really the core of our message. It works. Okay, so thanks to UAV drone development, we can do useful work with manned aircraft affordably. I'm not going to go to this in detail, but this just shows how, if you were to compare the kind of cameras that would be used in classic air surveys, where the camera mount alone is 1.25 million, never mind the camera itself would be several million, down to, say, an intermediate size where it would be medium format cameras like a phase 1, the camera and lens alone would cost you 800,000. But an over-the-counter Canon 5D Mark IV would cost you 80,000 Rand and deliver better quality and higher resolution imagery than classic survey cameras, for reasons I'm happy to discuss afterwards. So here's our toolkit. You can see we like Canon cameras, Nikons, anything else, Sony's would work just as well. This is the you don't see my cursor, do you? This is just the out the window lens that you'd use to get high resolution oblique images of animals. And this is the mount we made for the vertical imagery. A collection of lenses, GPSs, and Marina spoke earlier of the red edge that's used for drones. So even cameras that were developed for drones, we tie to a manned aircraft, and they work just perfectly. Just a closer image of instead of the 1.25 million rand camera mount, we just use a homemade vibration damper. Probably cost 50 rand to make, and it's perfect. So I want to skip this. You all have been exposed earlier to spatial resolution, ground sampling density. Just very briefly, your ground sampling density sets the limit of the spatial resolution that you can achieve. If your camera and lens system and if the atmosphere were perfect and there was no pollution, your spatial resolution could equal your ground sampling density, but it never does. So your spatial resolution is always a bit poorer than ground sampling density. But still, you have to start somewhere. So you choose a ground sampling density. The relationships are all very linear, determined by the density or the resolution you require, your camera model, the image, the sensor size, your flying speed. The output would be the flying height and the trigger intervals and the track width. Armed with that, we don't use flight planning software. We just use a GIS platform like QGIS to plan our flight. Make a printout. The printout also informs the pilot or the navigator the heights that the aircraft or the pilot will have to fly. It gets copied to the aircraft GPS to guide the pilot. And if all goes well, the pilot and spotter comes back with a collection of geolocated images. So each dot there represents the position of the camera when the shutter was clicked. And that is the Thorny Bush Nature Reserve, by the way, 17,000 hectares. Took 10 minutes to fly there, 3 hours to do the survey, 10 minutes to fly back. So in some cases, a manned aircraft makes it cheaper and more efficient, but not always. The same project, now looking at the spot graph, point cloud, just to illustrate that each point in the cloud is represented or is seen from multiple images. Up at the top here, that's the camera positions, and I just chose that point there, and there it shows the collection of images in which that point is seen. You get the idea. I'm going to stop the video and carry on, I hope. Same thing, now just a simulation or simulated fly-through. Is it going? Okay, so again, that's the point cloud, again showing the camera positions and then a thumbnail image of what was taken of a 70,000 hectare project that we could do in an afternoon, and that was at 18 centimeter resolution. So quite coarse in terms of what you UAV guys are doing, but still resolving enough features. In this case, the interest is in vegetation change over time after the thorny bush has dropped its fence with the greater Kruger. Okay, so you don't always need just vertical imagery. There's just, if you're interested in more. It's playing. Okay, good. So you can see the overhead, there was vertical images, but also a single orbit by the aircraft capturing a whole number of images obliquely. So the software does cope with a combination of vertical and oblique images, and in this case we were interested in really seeing the sides of the boulders and vegetation of that hill. It is a heritage site. I'm going to stop it there in the interest of going forward quickly. Okay, what Marina's mentioned earlier is the stripping of vegetation to reveal the terrain model. This demonstrates it. This is the point cloud, and rotate it so you can see what the vegetation looks like. On the left you'll see the trees are then stripped. So the software identifies what would be high vegetation, strips it, places it back, or you can strip the soil and just look at the vegetation. It's also sorted into buildings, man-made objects, road surfaces. So that really helps. It's just a demonstration of exactly what Marina spoke of earlier, on how your surface model can be changed into a terrain model. This is the orthomosaic from exactly the same project, and you might be interested to see that there's a fully ortho-rectified giraffe right there. Just happened to be in the picture. Zooming out bit by bit, some more giraffe come into view, and the orthomosaic of that project now superimposed on it the surface model, as exactly you showed us earlier. Surface model added with a bit of hill shading to make it more intuitive to interpret, but now the terrain model with the vegetation stripped away. Easy to see erosion, road marks, and in this particular case the spillways from the road probably contributing towards erosion in that project. Also very interesting, once the vegetation is stripped away, the termite mounds become quite evident. Am I running out of time? 5 minutes, thank you. Using exactly the same surface model, you can generate with any GIS software your contour lines, or appear a contour map, add to that drainage lines if you like, take away the contour lines, add more drainage lines at a finer detail or at a very fine detail if you like, complete with it. So, same terrain, looking at a slope analysis, much the same as the hill shaded model, but perhaps better highlighting the erosion problem areas. And again, the termite mounds always stand up very nicely if you look at a slope analysis. And then back to the DSM. Now, that was a small-scale project done at 4 centimeter resolution. Yes, manned aircraft can go down comfortably to about 4 centimeter, thanks to the handheld cameras nowadays having shutter speeds of up to 8,000th of a second and being able to take images at 7 or 10 images per second. So we can, that would be the limitation for big survey cameras. They only recycle every 2 seconds. So that is a resolution limitation to big full-scale survey cameras, and you can do better with handheld cameras. So that was a 4 centimeter. Here's an 18 centimeter, much zoomed out image of the Sabi Sand Reserve, a terrain model. The orthomosaic, so that is 60,000 hectares. That took, I believe, about 8, maybe 10 hours of flying together. Just an example, we also do demographic studies. This is the vast peri-urban areas surrounding or to the west of Kruger Park. Zooming out, and that is digitized. Each dwelling is assigned a code in terms of its size, and there's the whole area, 200,000 hectare project. And getting to vegetation classification, here's an orthomosaic in the Mariepskop area of the escarpment, the red, green, blue representation. It's overlaid with NDVI, which you all know, overlaid with a color infrared image, and using the 5-band information from the red edge camera, an attempt at vegetation classification. So you can see the blue areas, there's the index is eucalyptus, the pink is pines, the rest is either grassland or indigenous. Here's another heritage site. The orthomosaic, the terrain model, which revealed, with the vegetation stripped away, which revealed areas unknown previously, and I got told by the investigators that now allows them to go back and find new structures that were until now unknown. And that's a slope model and a closer examination of what the terrain model or the surface model revealed as actually stoneworks that were previously unknown. And here's the map. I sent them back with the areas of stoneworks marked out. And here's a quick fly-through of that area. Is it running? Okay, there we go. So this is a 3D point cloud. It's not actual footage. It's a virtual fly-through of the area. Can I turn the sound down somewhere? so interrupt that. Is there 1 minute left, or am I done?
I don't know, I'm done for your time.
1 minute, thank you. Okay, conclusions. Very briefly, the imagery from drones, light piloted aircraft, larger piloted aircraft, and satellite images complement each other. There's no need, there is some overlap, but I've never sensed that I'm stepping on anyone's toes, and I've never felt threatened by UAVs. Recommendations is that anyone needing a project, they should really define their requirements in terms of the spatial resolution, the geographic extent, and the spectral bands, and that will allow them to approach UAV, fixed-wing, satellite providers to give them the right product. And time's up? It's up. Okay, so I'm not going to show you the final video. Thank you.